Lisa here. I am so excited to be back for another episode of Owning Her Health. I'm going to tell you up front, this is a really long episode, so I had to break it up into two, mainly because I wanted to speak to you guys in the beginning about where Owning Her Health is going and bringing in the conversations of the masculine and the feminine and how that relates so differently than my original intention with the show, which now is 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 5 years old. I can't believe it. I can't say that I was as consistent through the periods of my great turmoil, which I get into in a few minutes. But if you've been with me since the very beginning, thank you so much for being here. If you're new to me, you may not realize my transition and into this conversation with the female founders in health and well-being, and that came out of my work as the belly guru and working in boutique medical models and things like that. But I had a big life change that ended up in a really bad experience with a divorce and almost bankruptcy, and just totally changed me. But yet, this was the conversation that just kept. It was almost as if this was set up for me to transition into this and rebrand into this conversation from my work in Vedic wisdom and women's health and mind body and pain coaching and all of this. It was like perfect, which I'm going to be getting into that whole story and speaking with people, expanding some of the conversations here to be a lot more into the becoming a CEO of your life, not just moving into entrepreneurship. Because as I've learned over the past 3 years of Mind Body Brand Academy, my 8-week incubator that runs twice a year, and leadership circle for women-owned founders in the health and healing spaces primarily, or just any service provision that tends to be kind of the medicine. You're bringing like a social minded aspect to your business. That itself has taught me that there's many women that go into business for themselves to be self-employed with still an employee mentality and not necessarily an enterprising mind. Not that that's a problem, but if you really do want to run a business and not a charity, and if you do want to not make this an expensive hobby and you're getting frustrated, it may be because you did not do that work, right? To get it into a enterprising mind. And so there's going to be a lot more like holistically, like getting into the becoming the CEO of your life, brought into owning her health. Okay. So I'm going to start off the podcast. Like I said, it's going to be about a half hour or so with, telling you where we're going and getting into the nitty gritty of the masculine and the feminine and how that works and making business sexy for us women, which is nothing that we've ever been given before. And then we will start the conversation with Dr. Yvonne, and that will conclude in part 2. So be on the lookout in a couple of days, or I don't know when you're listening to this, but there's a part 1 with Dr. Yvonne and part 2. Thank you so much. Newer, you might have not experienced with me the tremendous, basically tower moment of my life when my just everything crumbled. And it's so much the part of the Medicine Woman Rising conversation that I've been having here, the idea of goddess wisdom, which really is the feminine divine perspective of life, of the evolving human. It's like, I've never been more definite of the fact that this is a path I'm on. I'm on a sacred success path, and I'm taking a handful of women with me who are the leaders of the leaders for this next phase. I mean, the whole fact of 2020 coming in, the great pandemic of our time, and then the great resignation, and I really think 2022 is going to be this really great reorganization. And if you've been in my groups, Mind Body Brand Academy in particular, which was the only one I kept from the Belly Guru business that I'm now officially going to roll in, not necessarily the brand, but the business is going to officially go the end of the year. Um, you know that I've been talking to you guys. I was talking to you guys in 2019. I was like, something is up. Um, as I was going through things, I had a little break in this podcast in 2018. I mean, I was going through some stuff, but now on the other side, and believe me, I still have places to go. I mean, I've just gotten myself dug out of the hole. I'm not saying I'm on the top of my peak at all yet. I'm going to take you guys with me, and that's part of my plans here with The Evolving Human, which is my other podcast, and particularly here owning her health, because I truly am. I mean, it was like prophetic as I named the podcast. It had one indication where I was going to be working with or featuring for you guys a lot of women in the women's health conversation. And you guys know me. My whole, I mean, I'm going to own it. I know I keep saying, I say this, and if somebody else feels that I'm in error, please do reach out to me. But I believe was courageous enough to really formally bring the woo woo into the educated women's health global circles. Not that it wasn't out there, the feminine divine and masculine divine, and, people with using plant based medicines and nature cycles and things like that, but it really was kind of in the alternative realms. And it was also not in a friendly form of bringing in the evidence-based practices that we know, or the real advanced understanding of what was working in Western medicine, so that it could be a conversation that not only was not alternative, but I could show you that this is actually what medicine was trying to make. But unfortunately, and when I'm saying medicine, I say allopathic, the westernized medicine, the man-made medicine, was trying to commercialize and package and put into an industrial revolutionary type of mind, right? A very linear, productivity based and war culture, fight, fear-based culture. We were against the germ was going to kill us. And it just was a mentality which it was not entirely wrong, okay, but it was so manly, right? Like it was so um plagued, literally during the plagues, by the imbalance that we had in the world at that time, which was very patriarchal, conditioned. Social structures was very limiting in the whole concept of women's health was just not even there, right? Like we're still fighting the battle. We're still fighting the battle worldwide. And so, it's going to get clouded. And it's not necessarily an idea of being oppressed. It's more of like an ignorance that we have since come to see and learn. And I realize that a lot of my teachings through the Vedic wisdom, which is predating a lot of the other religious texts and all the medicines in terms of more systemized medicine, like Chinese medicine or Indian Ayurvedic medicine. We're talking like beforehand, like the native peoples of those regions type of medicine was more along the lines of the Vedic wisdom. And I know people are saying right now, well, isn't that the same as Ayurveda? No, it's not. Ayurveda was a packaged um, system of healing that came out of the Vedas. Yes, yes, but it also then went into diagnostics and kind of that individualistic idea, although much less than something like Western medicine. And we also see things like naturopath, and now with the onset of functional medicine, like there's all these derivatives that have come up over the past, oh gosh, I'm going to say I opened my practice in 2005, and it was kind of really foreign for me to be bringing in yoga therapeutics. And then, I was really happy to see health coaching because I knew Ayurveda wasn't going to cross the line. And that was 2014, where I really got formally trained with that and the essential oils and all that. So we're only talking about less than a decade where I think functional medicine really came on the radar 2015 or so, was really getting popular. So we're still in a very, very newborn infant. I don't even know if we can even say infancy. I guess we can say infancy of basically going back to the way it was. And so I feel that great pause for me wasn't necessarily 2020. If anything, that was my great healing and my cocooning. For the pauses I was kind of taking in 2018 and 19 from where I was going with this move from rebranding to from Dr. Lisa, from the Belly Guru to Dr. Lisa, and kind of coming in on my own brand and the whole curvy hustle as opposed to that linear grind business consulting and again the goddess wisdom, bringing in the feminine point of force, feel of business, of relationship, because every business is just relationships. Every relationship in our life is a learning experience, is an exchange of energy, is an exchange of energy in motion, emotion. So you can see in the way that I view things, which again comes from my background in really looking at all of those medicines I was talking about. I might have been introduced to mind body. I mean, if I have to say anything, I probably was introduced to human behaviors and studying the self, not through my religion. I was brought up a Roman Catholic. I really was through astrology. I was into horoscopes and astrology from very young. My mom would read the horoscope in Cosmo magazine, and I would really be into it. And this was before 10. And then as I became a preteen and I, looked at palmistry and, looking back right now, I mean, I was pretty witchy and my mother was too. She was into that too. But, a lot of Puerto Rican culture, Afro-Caribbean cultures, kind of had this like black magic, mystical side of their cultures. And so being brought up a Roman Catholic, it kind of was this area where it was like not really talked about. And if anything, I felt like I was playing with the devil's work. And that was so wrong. That was so wrong. It was so wrong because the devil is within all of us, by the way. And no matter what your belief system is, cosmic consciousness really is about us all being one and with nature. And so looking up at the stars, and I have since understood now how menstrual cycles do really line up with moon cycles. And even watching the energetics get thrown off and the law of the universal law of polarity having gone so far into the patriarchy with healthcare and governments and academia, education systems and religious organizations and economic forums and everything that basically makes up a society into an organized form. The lack of the feminine for so long was just bound to have things come up, such as starting with Me Too. And, we can say second wave feminism, because first wave was just about being human to each other. It was just saying, look, I'm not an animal. I'm not property. I'm another human being that I'm just as important as you. And that was an equality conversation. But when Feminism 2.0 came in, as much as we were pushing and moving women out of the home, we were not doing it equally with bringing men into the home. And so even though we were getting more recognized and keep on pushing through 3.0 with girl power and sex, money, power struggles going on and sexual freedom in the way of like a lady boss kind of thing, I think we started actually going off track because what we were doing is more and more mimicking the illness in the patriarchy. And I call that line lipstick patriarchy. A lot of women were thinking they were ultra feminists, but the reality is, if you look at it, ladies, you are grown up mean girls. And I say that with a lot of love because I was there too, and we were conditioned for that, and it got us really far. But, if you're still being mean to the other woman or scared or in competition with that lady that comes up for that one spot or two spots on the board, and you're concerned she's going to replace you because there can't be three women on the board, then you're the lipstick patriarchy. you're the patriarchy as well. You just put some high heels and some lipstick on it and put in some curves. And luckily, the fashion has gotten a lot more feminine minded, meaning we like to show our differences in body structure. We are proud of our body and all of that, body image love that we got over the years. But the problem is, you kind of are handing over your power. Ultimately, the feminine divine we've never really seen her yet. We saw her in the extreme of something that wasn't mainstream. It wasn't career oriented in the same way of corporate. The women that went off to yoga and Reiki and energy work and, wearing flowing dresses and flowers in their hair and, putting menstrual blood on their face and things. And that's too extreme. We can't bring people in. And one thing that Belly Guru always was for me was it was never going to be an alternative healing for the pregnancy mom or the pregnancy year and fertility and postpartum. And then moving into just, all the women's transitions. And I was always walking this fine line. I wanted to speak in the language to meet people where they were on a majority, primarily my peers, because I wanted to influence my peers. My struggle was that my peers were my biggest obstacle sometimes with bringing in some of these things. It really wasn't the public. It was doctors that wouldn't refer them to yoga because of their own issues and ignorance. It was other physical therapists giving me a really hard time, as if my you know uh, that validity as a physical therapist was being challenged because I brought in a very ancient system that has a lot of up and coming, I knew at the time, research showing, and just experiential knowledge that I brought. See, that's the other thing. That's the other thing, the Western model in education and academics, and then moving that into education for our healthcare system and our economic system and our religious organizations and all of these other sectors, healthcare and things like that. The problem is that we went into a intellectual intelligence, uh, a a kind of which then evolved out of even experimentation and really got into show me how it's been proven before and then I'll listen to you. Show me how it's been proven before and then I'll publish you. And the problem with that is that there really is limiting innovation, right? And again, that's a lack of that feminine creatrix being respected. Being respected. And that comes from us letting go of understanding experiential wisdom. Experiential wisdom is really 2/3 of that evidence-based practice. And I'm going to say this till the day I die. Every single peer of mine that tells me and wants to tell me that Sackett's three-prong model or the, three-legged stool model or however you want to see, you want to put it on a chart or whatever, was not supposed to be equal between the patient's experiential knowledge and wisdom, the healthcare provider's experiential knowledge and wisdom, and then 1/3 of the researched, experimentation, the new science. I will go to my deathbed saying that it was fully intended because I literally heard him say it on a YouTube, which to this day I've sent that to so many of my peers in Facebook groups and things like that over the years who were trying to say it wasn't supposed to be equal. It literally was coming out of his mouth. But that goes to show you how we get, as human beings, so stuck on our cognitive bias, um, because of our belief systems, because of our conditioning, because of the woven systemic things such as racism, genderist issues, ageism, just all these cultural things, which at its root, in my mind, if we were to talk about the interactions and the relationships, the social relationships between cultures, ages, different economic levels, all of those determinants of health and determinants of well-being in a social structure. At the root of that, and why I am so passionate about bringing back goddess wisdom to the collective, and I mean men too, okay? You men out there, that 25% that listen to my Owning Her Health things, you need to hear this maybe even more than us to have this shift, because when we tear down the patriarchy, we need to tear down, and listen to me very, very clearly. When the patriarchy falls, what we need to do is tear down the tower of feminism too. And that might be mind-boggling to those of you, like I said, that are in this lipstick patriarchy, that don't really understand. It was never about one being better than the other. The stories of Adam and Eve, of the masculine, the feminine, of any of these conversations, and any religious texts of trying to give wisdom, which is what they're all about, right? If they're not about control, then they're about trying to give wisdom, genuine understanding of the fact. It was never, ever about one over the other. It was never, even if we were to take out the editing of the patriarchy on our creation stories. And again, I was brought up with the Bible, so I'm going to refer back to that. To some extent, I'm a kingdom maker, okay? We would see, if I were to just take off the veil of ignorance and invisibility that women have, okay? And yes, women and men both have masculine and feminine. But womanhood is your sacred contrast to come in a form and function on this earth to be in the experience of the feminine form of force, through the eyes of the feminine form of force. Not only the feminine, but biased, that cognitive bias, okay, that experiential wisdom meeting that intellectual intelligence, that yoga within is an XX, okay, or an XY in form. Now, your consciousness, your soul, your spirit, we're seeing and realizing over time, gosh, something's gone on in the collective. Is this evolution? Is this us killing ourselves off, or is this us evolving to go to the next level? But it's somewhere along the line. Our codex, our feminine and masculine codes began to blend in a way that some people's spirit would come in the feminine. And they had XY. And some people's spirit and soul would come in through the masculine. And they had XX. And then we also saw over time, like I said, conditioning. We can be put in situations where we are molded, where it's not about our codex. And when I mean that, I mean our genetics and also our spiritual DNA infusion, our spirit, our soul containers for those expressions. It's not what we thought. It's not because you have a breast cancer gene that you're going to get breast cancer, okay? We have learned now over the past 20 years or so, there is this thing called epigenetics, and our environmental influences, our lifestyle choices, guys, okay, actually seem to be encoding us differently, seems to be, in my vision and downloads that I have gotten from my guides, I guess that's the best way to say it, and from my education and what's made sense through, other wise books of various sources overlapping, is that it's not that they're changed in like a mutation type of way. It's that they are literally kind of congested or flowing in a certain way, to a certain rhythm, to a certain vibration and frequency, going through their polarities. And the best image I can give of that to you guys is the idea of the masculine and feminine tantra, or the kundalini rising, and the infinity sign. If you've ever seen the infinity sign, it's like the two snakes interlapping and coming in medical caduceus. And that image, those images are really where you go apart and you be your individual, and then you're drawn together, and then you're pushed apart, and then you're drawn together. And if you can like imagine that, you start to kind of see where sexual intercourse comes from. And you start to understand how, even kissing in the place of you know, uh, intimate kissing is that same kind of come in and come out. And, we start to understand these rhythms are underlying, underlying. So that's where we're going to be going into all these conversations, the complexities of it, the intricacies of it. Um, not, it's a conversation on womanhood at an energetic developmental level. It's just the quantum, looking at everything from the quantum, relationships from the quantum, uh, healthcare from the quantum, or our own well being from the quantum, and everything else that comes out of that. And so I am really looking forward to the upcoming shows of Owning Our Health. As I said, up and coming right now is the first 10 15 minutes or so of my talk with Dr. Yvonne Castillo, who I am happy to say is doing holistic stuff her way. She's cracked the code of getting and staying pain free naturally without endless painkillers, procedures, or trips to the doc. And so we went into her conversation, and in her conversation, even though it was very straight laced performance work, particularly around pre and post surgical support, and then for women 40 plus, that neglected, pain free, powerful project that she has, the pain free, powerful project. So you're going to want to definitely listen in if you're thinking of creative ways you could repackage your work. She's a doctor of physical therapy. She comes from a family that her other sisters also went into healthcare, all in their different divisions, but she's put in this movement special. She basically specialist and has repackaged herself. So I thought she was a really good person to have a conversation with, because again, what we're trying to do here on the show is kind of feature how could we take our years of life skills and work skills and relational skills and just working through our traumas and everything, and at some point around midlife or so repackage that stuff, even if it's a little bit earlier. I mean, people are so burnt out of the education process, being so manipulated from like preschool on, that they're like graduating and not even wanting to do what they want to do, what they wanted to do, or what they were forced to do. So as you listen to her conversation and listen to us on here, then looking at her practice, you can get an idea of how creative you could be. Like I said, she calls herself a movement specialist. She's got a three 3S mobility method that she markets. And so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to not only learn another woman behind the brand conversation, Goddess Wisdom Chat, but to definitely see what she's doing in health and well-being. So without further ado, here is Dr. Yvonne.
Welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to real talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
Being a physiotherapist, bringing in a holistic type of model, and into this goddess wisdom conversation. So what I want to start out with, Yvonne, tell me kind of how you got to where you are in your words. We know kind of what you're doing, a little synopsis of it. We'll get more into your challenge and your group
Mhm.
and your community building. But tell me a little synopsis of how you went from wherever you started. Like, why did you even get into, your health profession, and then how
Mhm.
that changed? Because obviously, as people hear on here, I'm not your average physiotherapist. You're not your
Mhm.
average physiotherapist. What made the change for you and to what you're doing today?
Okay, so I have always been in love with just movement and the body. I think it's just such a beautiful thing, and it's such an empowering thing to be able to move, and it's such a wonderful way of expressing yourself. I've always been very, very active athlete, very competitive and stuff like that. And as I was and I've always been a super big science geek, so that's kind of where my as I, pursued endeavors. I went to Berkeley, then went to UCSF, and was just trying to kind of suss out what I wanted. And it was really, for me, physical therapy was like such the beautiful marriage of everything that I loved. I also, in between undergrad and graduate school, I got certified as a Pilates instructor. That's how I put myself through school. So it was just I love being able to kind of work with people, and like what kind of deterred me from going into medicine or a lot of other profession is really being able to stand with someone through their journey. And the process of rehabilitation is probably one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see. Just the human spirit was probably one of the greatest joys that I've been able to be a part of, and to really be the kind of being able to go with someone through that and really see just what is possible for somebody, and to be their kind of support going through that. And that was something that was so special to me, and just see the transformation. It's truly remarkable. I've, as a pre and post-operative specialist, I worked with a lot of surgical cases, and I've seen some really wild, wild
I
things.
bet.
Yeah. And so that was kind of what drew me into a career of physical therapy. My older sister, she's an orthopedic surgeon. My younger sister's a nurse. It's kind of funny. My dad's a general contractor. So everybody's always like, how did all of you girls end up in medical field? And
Well, he
I
was
think,
cutting things and
yeah,
angling
I
it, and
know. So
that's
my
what
sister,
we're
she's like,
doing.
it all makes sense, just kind of that point of service. But yeah, so I mean, and I'm such a big uber nerd that I like had to know everything. So as I started my career out in outpatient orthopedics, I really was like, I need to know everything. Like I really need to understand, why, what is the journey that people are taking when they come to see me? Like what is bringing them here? So that's why I started really focusing on pre and post operative care, because it's like, oh my gosh, if we could actually get these people before they have to go down the surgery route,
Yes.
and really focus on the preventative side of it, was such a big piece of it. So I started observing, I've seen over probably 200 surgeries at this point in time. So then I started getting mentored by a lot of some of the leading orthopedic surgeons in kind of not only where I am, but kind of renowned around the world, and really getting the behind the scenes look at what really goes on in the OR. Seeing kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of it.
Yes.
But the common thread I would see over and over again was literally the one thing that surprised me the most is how blindsided so many people were with, the whole process of everything. And a lot of people would come in and you would ask them, okay, like, well, okay, what was the thing? And they wouldn't even know it was being done to them. And they just were kind of like, and that's to no fault of their own. I think we've all kind of been conditioned as, the person in the white coat knows best for your body. But I started to see a pattern of a lot of things that were really missing, and people weren't getting the whole kind of story. And I think even in kind of the therapy realm, and how, depending on where you are listening from the world, things are very different in different healthcare systems and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people are kind of, I guess I would say, kind of short-sighted what's possible for them. And I think a lot of it goes back to just a lack of listening to what people really want to achieve, and then really being able to, again, like I say, walk alongside someone so that they can reach these goals. I think sometimes a lot of people are left just kind of limping along through life, and a lot of people are told those stories. It's your age, it's your genes. It's just a part of something you have to accept. You were hard on your body. You were an athlete. It's like, okay, well, arthritis, and, that's the normal cascade of things. You just get, handed pills and you get the cortisone shots and then you go in for your joint replacements. And that's just kind of the way it is. And I don't believe that. And I've seen it time and time again that isn't the case. And again, the putting the emphasis on there's so much that can be done. So you don't have to get to the point. Time and time again, when people come and see me, I'm always like, oh, it didn't have to be this hard. It didn't have to be that hard. And I think even too, I've worked with countless people that could avoid the OR altogether when you, with the key pieces,
Right.
if you actually get to the root cause of what is going on. And I think as such a very symptom focused society, it's like, oh, I have pain in this one area. That's the only thing we're going to focus on. And really not thinking of kind of whole person and really going deeper into the level of, okay, what is actually really causing this? You'll forever stay trapped in kind of those cycles of pain, and you're just trading one injury for the other. And I think it's kind of the biggest lie that everybody's been sold is just like the pain relief thing versus the actual concept of what I believe in is pain freedom, actually being free from pain. And where it's not the overriding ruling thing in everything in your life.
Let me ask you something, Yvonne, because you have a similar story to me. I started in ortho sports med. I had gotten my undergrad in athletic training, did the ortho thing, was there for 10 years before I switched over to women's health. But you, like me, switched over to the women's health. So was there a personal, was that a strategic thing, or was it like, flipping your own pains with that?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is I was having this conversation with a mentor of mine just the other day, is you start to pick up on these patterns and these little things, these little kind of signals that you start to be like, that's just like, okay. But I really started to see, just because, again, like I said, I focused on pre and post-operative thing, and where I am, there's people are really, really, really active. And, I was starting to see like a lot of women. You see it in general too, but kind of your 40 plus, 50 plus woman who's very active. She still likes to run. She likes to go hiking. She likes to do all these things. And I'll never forget, I had one executive that I was working with. She's the CEO of Deckers. And she wanted to throw a football. And that was her thing. She wanted to get back to that. She was a competitive athlete. That was a big part of her identity. And the doctor kind of looked at her like, well, you don't need to do that. That's not important. It was silly to him. And that was one of the things that really kind of got under my nerve. It's just like, who are you to decide what is of value to somebody else and what they want to get back to? And I see that over and over, people are shortchanged because of their gender, because of their age, because maybe they've never done it before. I've worked with people 85 plus doing marathons, doing Ironmans. It is possible. But I think as a society, everybody's just kind of, I don't know, drink the Kool-Aid that we have to just kind of like, our lights have to kind of dwindle and dim down as we age, versus actually burning brighter and celebrating the fact that we are
even having a reason, right? Like
100%.
Why should I have to have a reason? Have we gotten in healthcare where I have to justify why we should optimize your well-being because we're so in a, if you're not necessarily diagnostically impaired by those, whatever bare minimums, right? Like if you can walk to the bathroom, you can get discharged, never mind if you're dragging your foot and it's your 80-year-old wife that's going to be trying to help you at home. In your point of view, what was it that you were going to bring? So you have your own, style of doing things. Tell me a little bit about your practice and presently, like what you're trying to instill in your work that maybe, let's say, I don't know, maybe like the you of 10 years ago didn't know, or 15 years ago didn't know. What does the you now have to tell that person or all the other people that are like you right now?
Yeah, well, I would say I already started picking up on it and already started integrating it when I was still kind of working in more like the corporate clinical setting, is you cannot help a healing body and not address the person holistically. You cannot ask them questions and support them with their stress, with how they're being supported at home, with their diet, their nutrition, looking at their hormones, looking at their sleeps. Do they have friends? Who's going to support them? And again, that was one of the biggest missing pieces I thought, is that's what I really worked on. I worked on getting a team to support them, is really bring your wife and educating them, like, you're going to need to have someone come stay with you. What is your work like? Do they support you? Do they not support you? And empowering them to have conversations with the people in their world, so that, again, they're not blindsided. They're able to actually, have a conversation of how much time they need to take off, talking to their breast. And I mean, even too, it's like, what do you do in a situation where you do not have a supportive boss and do that? How can I advocate for them, or how can they advocate for themselves? And there's so many tools out there that people aren't aware of, but it is really, I think, of giving the resources and the tools and support that people are empowered to advocate for themselves. I think a lot of times people think when they walk into an office, it's like, okay, it's up here and it's there, versus like, no, we're having a conversation as a collaborative conversation. It's like, I'm telling you kind of, these are what I need, versus it being like, oh, I'm just being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So for me specifically, I focus on helping women over 40 achieve permanent pain freedom and do it naturally, so that they can get back to an active, unlimited life without, depending on the pills and the potions and the procedures, and kind of going through that kind of healthcare hamster wheel. But really, because what I saw too was, especially, as these women too, is like, people it was like hormones didn't exist, as like nutrition wasn't even a component of it. Stress was just something as like, oh, well, that's just a part of life. As women take on so much, and I see it happen over again, as they put themselves last, and that's really too, like in their 40s and 50s, is like many people like have gone through pregnancies, have gone through big like career changes, the kids are finally up, and it's like, oh, well, now I finally have time for me. It's either until things get so bad, or some things have finally gotten off their plate. And, after kind of decades of these things kind of brewing, it's pretty significant. And I see it's as such a beautiful time. And we kind of spoke about this too, is where you can kind of choose like door A or door B.
Right.
It's really you always have the power and the time to rewrite your story, but really there's something magical about that, where it's like, really, you can step into anything that you want, and you have, a whole nother chapter of your life, another whole half of your life to live. And for people to tell you at 40 and 50, that's kind of it. It's like, oh my gosh, you've got, 6-7 decades left to just, I don't know, do anything you want.
Absolutely. And, we're speaking to the science is
Mm-hmm.
out there, but we really do live in a world where it doesn't necessarily get implemented, because maybe it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't fit in the business model, or it just
Right.
is too hard to teach people. I mean, why are regular medical doctors now still so resistant about going back to school, learning functional nutrition, just even understanding functional nutrition? Why are they just looking at something they can pull up about the USDA, whatever, that's
Right.
everyone admits is behind and is just for corporate interests? Like, why are we still doing that? It's habit, it's human behaviors. And I
Right.
love to get into that sort of stuff, whether it be for business or for behaviors in health and change. And that's really where we've got to get to. I'm going to end it right there, and we'll go into that conversation that Dr. Yvonne and I have in terms of what is the holdup and what are some of the things she's employing, so that people do not have to be sitting there in strain and pain, and basically setting themselves up for a self-fulfilling prophecy that we've been sold. So we're going to get into that, as well as then that starts our conversation a little bit of how we're women that have been going and conditioned in this certain way. And this is really a time where we need to re-examine, is that healthy for us? I mean, literally, the corporate world was not made for a woman's physiology. It wasn't hardly made for what a man's physiology, the way that it's evolved. So we're going to get into that conversation. Be sure to listen to part 2. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.